welcome to week number 2 for the month of November. We're going to be continuing on with our standard track tune, Times They Are Changin' by Bob Dylan. I hope everybody's managing okay. The times are a-changin'. Last week was a rough one for me. I hope that, everybody's managing all right and, trying to stay optimistic and know that, know that we're all here. We're gonna survive. Okay, cool. Remember, just like anything else, this is a recorded class. Nobody's in live setting for me, so you guys are only gonna be accessing it through the recording. So yeah, make sure you remember you can always stop and rewind. You can always fast forward things that you don't need. You can always slow things down. A really helpful feature in YouTube is to actually click on the gear icon at the bottom right, and you can change the speed of playback. So rather than playing at full speed, if you need to go over an exercise or something like that and it's moving a little too quickly, you can always back up the video a little bit and then change that speed setting on the gear icon. Super helpful, especially for purposes like ours of learning music. Anyway, hope everybody's doing well. Today my plan is to review our right hand, review the chord progressions, and then maybe start to work on singing and playing. Singing and playing is really, I think, going to be the tough part of this tune. I think the right hand and left hand are fairly basic and, won't take too much repetition before it starts to become muscle memory. The big one is, a number of different progressions that you got to memorize. Not a number of one big long progression, but a number of different groups of chords that you need to memorize, and then also being able to combine those both with the rhythm. But the singing, there are 5 verses to this song, so not only is it a tough one to learn how to sing and play, but it's also a tough one to memorize if you're going to get this, locked into your repertoire. So let's do a quick review. Remember, our right hand is super simple this month. What we're working on for the beginner arrangement is just 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And really what we want to be doing is trying to accent the first beat, right? So if our first beat can be accented, then what happens is it segments all of these down strums into groups, right? There's our first one, there's our second one, there's our third one, there's our fourth one, right? 1, 2, 3. And finish on 1. And remember, there's a couple of ways to accent. One is to actually physically play the strings harder, which, that often logically involves us bringing our hand up a little higher, snapping our wrist a little more. But remember, you can get some of that extra energy from just pushing that finger out as well. So if you do a little accent like that, and then some softer strums after, you'll get that accent. See how my pointer finger is doing a little bigger movement? It's being a little more engaged and snapping out on that first beat. The other thing that you can do to highlight that accent a little more is to actually underemphasize the strums on beat 2 and 3, right? This is a little bit of review, but we want that hard hit on 1 and then softer on 2 and 3. One of the ways I like to do that is to do kind of a half strum, right? Instead of strumming all 4 strings and snapping my hand down, I keep that finger tucked, and it's really more in my elbow coming down in a very short motion, and then I just try to target the top half of the strings, right? And that, the top half of the strings could be just the G, it could be the C and G, it could be the G, C, and E strings. But really what I'm trying to do is more just focus my target a little bit higher, right? So I get all the strings and then softer on 2 and 3 by only targeting the top half of the strings, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now once I've got that locked in, remember the variation, let's go ahead and pull up the handout real quick. The variation for this is really simple. In between beats 2 and 3, we're going to be playing an up strum. That's it. So for our beginner handout is here. There is our variation. Remember, that red arrow here, the way the arrangement is written in Sound Slice is that this is actually happening. This up strum is actually happening at the tail end of each rotation. So I play G, E, C, G, E minor, C, G, and then on this last G, I would do that up strum. I would do it here on this D, I would do it here on this G. Basically, anytime you're turning from one section of the chord progression to the next, right? And remember, these line up with each line in the lyrics, right? So I go, come gather around, people, wherever you roam. So for this last one, 1, 2, and 3. And then right there, admit that the water, that's the start of the second line, so you know that's sort of the end of that section of the chord progression. Cool? All right, so let's try alternating between those two. Remember, just quarter notes, 1, 2, 3. And let's try it with the up strum. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. And let's go back to the first one, just quarter notes. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Let's go 4, and then we'll switch. Here we go. 1, 2, and 3. Nice. Let's go 2 rotations. 1, 2, 3. Ready and switch. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and now just 1. Switch, 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 switch. And remember, these two kind of different ways to play the strum pattern. Remember, I really want you to think about them as two different parts of the same feel, or two different parts of the same groove, right? It's really not like every end of the progression you add that up strum. It's more like that's a good place to start with it, but really I want it to be a little more natural, more like you have these two different ways to express how the rhythm sounds, and then you're using one, as the main source, like kind of the main groove, and then you're using the second one as more of an embellishment, right? It doesn't have to happen on the end of each line. It can happen every other one, but again, you don't want to overuse that variation, or else it starts to establish that as the main section of the groove. All right, cool. Let's while we're here, why don't we go ahead and add the intermediate way to sort of approach this. Now, structurally, we're actually not changing anything in the intermediate arrangement. What we're really doing is changing how we play one of these beats. So I'll go ahead and skip to the intermediate handout. We'll take a look at this. So you can see the first line is the same. What we're doing is 3 quarter notes, 1, 2, 3, with an accent on the first beat. And then for the second line, the only thing we're substituting is this G string or ghost note on the second beat. And that's another way, when you think about how to create rhythm that is textured and varied and interesting, what you really want to think about is the number of different sounds that you can create. Now, those underemphasized strums, when I was kind of strumming downward, but focusing my target on the top half of the strings, really we achieve a very similar sound. We might hit the C string, we might just hit the G string, but it's a very similar sound, but the technique feels different. And one of them kind of has this more percussive attack just by virtue of the weight of my hand and then the front of my nail, right? If I just use my thumb and grab the string like this, then what I get is a very particular sound, one that's a little bit less dense and less heavy. I kind of consider it a lighter sound, right? So one way you can play that second line or that variant is to play 1, 2, and 3, right? So instead of playing down, down, up, down, I play down, thumb, up, down, right? It's kind of 25% of the sound, almost like a drone string. And there's a reason that we call it a ghost note, is because it's sort of substituting a down strum for kind of an under-emphasized sound, right? Like a reverse accent almost. Cool? So remember, this technique, when I grab the string with my thumb, I really don't want a lot of movement up and down with my elbow. I don't want a lot of wrist twisting. It's more of kind of engaging my thumb and just grabbing at the string, and you see my hand position doesn't really change, right? So when I'm playing down, 2, and 3, see how my hand really stays close to the string, But you notice, even on that grab, see how my hand comes up barely and then comes down barely, right? Still have a little bit of that connection to the tempo, but I'm not doing this, that downward motion and getting my hands really far away from the strings. It's really just that grab. See how my thumb just engages, gets a little more active and plays that G string. Cool? So let's try that new sort of attack, and we'll just play that second line embellishment over and over again. 2, 3, ready, here we go. Oh, I'll take that off. 1, 2, 3, ready, here we go. Down, thumb up, down, down. So down, G up, down. And you notice that accent is still there, right? First beat, right there, you want that to be the loudest. Remember, you can achieve that by, of course, strumming harder, but if you just engage your pointer finger, right, sort of snap that finger through the strings, you'll get that accent without a lot of effort and without a lot of big changes in your hand position. Cool? So now let's try and rotate back to those quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and let's go to the second. 1, 2, and 3. Let's just do that back and forth. Quarter notes, and 1, 2, and 3. Good. And quarter notes, and back to the second rhythm. Good. Last time, and back to the quarter notes. And let's finish on one here. Now what's cool about this is you could think about them as like, oh, this is the intermediate rhythmic pattern, and this is the beginner intermediate or beginner pattern. But what I really like to think about is that since all of these rhythms or techniques or sequencing of sounds that we create, they're all sort of built from the same feel, right? They're all built from the same kind of sound that we're trying to emulate. So really, they're all just variations of each other, right? So now what you want to think about for yourself is that, oh, now instead of saying, oh, I have 2 things to learn, it's more like, no, I have 3 different options, right? I can play the quarter notes. I can play the second, that sort of incorporated up strum, right? Or I can put a ghost note on beat 2 and make it a little lighter, right? And so if you're really fluid with the right hand being able to move between all 3 of those, then what you've created is sort of 3 different ways to say that rhythm. And that unlocks some pretty powerful options for yourself, right? Like you don't have to just be locked in with one rhythm that consistently happens throughout the arrangement. You have this ability to be able to kind of improvise freely and use whatever your hand is feeling, or use whatever your ear is hearing, whatever your body wants to sort of produce for the sound. Cool? So let's try moving between all 3 of those real quick, and then we'll move on to reviewing the chord progression. 1, 2, 3, ready, here we go. Let's go first one, quarter notes. Nice. Let's go 4 rotations, and now let's go to the second version of the beginner. Go to the intermediate second version. Down, thumb up, down. Nice. Let's try 2 rotations of each. Quarter notes. And let's see the up strum. And to the ghost note. And let's finish on one here. Remember, if we want to involve all 3 of those options, then that's really what the right hand's job is, to move between all of those different elements and have them feel good. Have them feel, really solid and entrenched in our muscle memory. So that it's more automatic, especially as we start to build other skills like moving between the chord progressions and being able to sing and play. Speaking of chord progressions, let's review. Remember, our chord progressions are kind of grouped in sets. They're either 4 or 5 chords long. And the most important thing to understand is that the first 3 all start the same way, with G, with E minor, and then C, right? So no matter what, on my first half of my whole long chord progression, I'm going to start each set with those 3 chords. So really make sure that you have those chords connected and can move in between them. And remember, one of the most important things in this position shift is to feel that little step up. One way you can think about this too is if you just slide this G chord to the 3rd and 4th fret, now you're in the right position to be in the E minor. If I'm here and I try to get into that E minor shape, see how I'm more surrounded in this neighborhood, 3 to 1. But if I shift that chord shape up a half step and then switch to chord shape, see how my hand is more naturally landing in between frets 4 and 2. So if you're doing this shift here, then make sure that you're moving, back and forth between the 1st and the 2nd position on the fretboard. Cool? All right, so let's try that progression, G, E minor, and C. 1, 2, ready, go. Oh, sorry, I counted 4. 1, 2, go. G, 2, 3, E minor, 2, 3, and C. Now the first progression, I'm going to end on 2 measures of G, right? Second rotation, I'm going to go G, E minor, C. Around you have gone, and now I'm going to finish to that D chord. If we're in the beginner, we can finish to that 2-finger D7, right? Oh, that's what I was going to say. we are in the beginner intermediate class, so it's actually a way easier transition between G and E minor if we're using those other 2-finger voicings, right? We just lift the ring finger to C and D. But what I was saying before applies, obviously, if you're going to use the full version of E minor, 0, 4, 3, and 2. If you're using the easier version, then you don't have to do that position shift. But again, if we're talking about stepping up into the intermediate arrangement, then that's what you would be doing in terms of left-hand technique, is learning how to go from a G minor chord into an E minor chord. Cool? All right, so we're talking about our second progression, and this one we're going to finish on that D minor, right? C. And then D7, right, or D chord. And now what we're going to do on the 3rd rotation, it's actually a repeat of the first one. To E minor, C, and then 2 rotations of G, right? Cool. And then the second line down is where we're going to switch to A minor. And then A minor, and then D7. Yeah. And now the big turn here, we got this 1 D7, pinky down, ring finger, and then open, and then we go the times they are. Here's our turn, the changing. Cool. So last week we had mentioned that for that 5th rotation, when you have those 4 measures of D, really, really simple to just play that D7 version, right? So now what we want to make in addition to that is kind of this voicing that happens in the tune where we get this descending line, right? You better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone. So all I'm doing to that chord shape 2-0-2-0 is I'm adding the pinky on the 3rd fret, and then I'm adding the ring finger on the 2nd fret, and then I'm going back to the first chord shape that I did. So if I was going to do all 4 of those measures of D that's in that group, right, the 5th group, then I would go D with the A string open, pinky down on 3, ring finger on 2, and then open. And there's my 4 measure set. 1, 2, 3. Better start sinking or swimming. 2, 3, ready, and go. You better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone. Let's try it again. 1, 2, go. You better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone. Now let's see if we can try it with our rhythm, right? 1, 2, 3. Let's keep it nice and simple. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, ready. And you better start 3rd fret or you'll sink like a stone. Let's try it again. Open, 3, 2, and 0. All right, now let's try it with our variant with the up strum in between. 1, 2, 3, ready, here we go. 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, right? 1, 2, 3, ready, here we go. You better start swimming or you sink like a stone. 1, 2, and 3, 2, 2nd fret, and open. Last time. cool. We'll pull up the visual. Here are our chord progressions. Remember, big thing to pay attention to is that if you want to start to practice that variant, these are the places where it fits in really well, right? Right before you head to the next grouping. And remember that corresponds with each line, right? So this is our first grouping of chords. This is our second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Cool? Let's go nice and slow. 1, 2, 3. Actually, we'll blow this up a little bit. Whole thing. 1, 2, 3. Ready? Here we go. E minor, C, and then G. And we can do the variant. G, E minor, and C. And then D. Good. Accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. And the time you is worth saving. You better start 3rd fret, sinking or swing by stone, for the times they are a-changin'. Nicely done. Let's try that one more time. Here we go. Ready and go. Gather around E minor, people, wherever you roam. Dot, 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 the waters around you have grown. Dot, 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 G, but soon you'll be drenched to the bone. Dot, 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 if your time to you is worth saving, good. D, better start 3rd fret, sinking or sink like a stove. G, the turn, and they are a-changin'. Cool. So that was a quick review with a few bumps up in difficulty if you're looking for a little bit more of a challenge. Yeah, we still got a little bit of time. So before we go, I wanted to talk a little bit about learning how to sing and play. Now, this song might feel a little more straightforward, especially because there's not a ton of places where these don't happen on a strong moment in the lyrics, right? You can kind of hear these hits. Obviously, these ones that split the words are a little bit harder, but if you kind of feel, the consonant that happens after, around, and round itself is kind of a word, but this one is actually splitting the word, so it's a little bit tougher. But remember, the best way to kind of analyze this a lot of times is without the uke in your hand, right? If I can learn how, especially if I can learn a way that I can tap where I can hit an accent pretty hard, you notice how my pointer finger, I'm kind of lifting my hand up and hitting just a little harder. I try to create that accent so that I get a stronger sound on beat 1, and that's really where the chord changes come, right? Come gather around people. You feel how when I start that word, if you look, that's where the chord is hitting. So learning how to do these mile markers is really, really important. And you notice that, I only did this on verse 1, but remember, that's really because I don't want you to start to sight read these and do it sort of karaoke style. Really, the best thing to do would be to print this out, and then you can kind of finish with dots. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, right? If you can hit those little dots and kind of create those markers for yourself, what you'll find is that your body starts to get the expectation for what's coming, and it's a lot easier to do verse 2 after you've done verse 1, a lot easier to do verse 3 after you've done verse 1 and 2, and so forth. Cool? So let's just try that little tapping exercise, and remember, there's only 3 beats per measure, so you really want to hit a strong hit on the beat, and that's really where you're going to feel that next chord change come. Let's give it a try. 1, 2, 3, ready. Here we go. Gather around people wherever you roam. There's that G by itself, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accepted that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. 2, 3, G by itself. If your time to you is worth saving. So you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changin'. Now, remember, doing that without the uke in your hands, it's so helpful because it's simple, right? You can do that with clapping. You could tap your foot, some way that you can start to connect the cadence of the lyrics with the actual tempo of the song and be able to successfully do it. That's the really important part. And remember, this song might be a little simpler to do, but maybe I'm working on a song I'm less familiar with, or that seems a little bit more challenging. Maybe the vocals have kind of a syncopated feel. It's really important that you can break these things down into more digestible chunks, right? Maybe you don't just go from line 1 all the way to line 6. Maybe you repeat line 1 over and over again until you're really, really sure of how the cadence of the lyrics connects with that consistent tempo, right? Any part where you're really having a hard time kind of like, spitting out however many syllables you need to fill in that word, that's a really great place to be able to kind of create a small loop and do it over and over again, right? Maybe I'm having a hard time with let's just say, for the times they are a-changin'. And you could just repeat, for the times they are, and if I repeat that 5 or 6 times, what you'll find is that your body will make these little adjustments where it needs to. It'll kind of log in where it's doing it correctly. And you have this opportunity to sort of loop that section and be able to really, really lock it in. Remember, what you're looking for is sureness. You're looking for, like, I don't have a little question mark. Maybe that's when I start that word. I want to be positive. Once I have that locked into my body, then it's a lot easier to take it to the ukulele where you're applying more complicated technique on top of it. At least you have this framework. Your imagination has kind of memorized how it's supposed to sound, and then it's a lot easier to be able to replicate that with technique on the ukulele. Okay, cool. Now that we've got that, let's see if we can jump to taking it to the uke, but I'm not going to do the full rhythm, or I'm going to just do the first rhythm, right? Not without the upstrum. 1, 2, 3, just quarter notes. Come gather. And remember, take the left hand, you can cover the strings to get that more muted sound. 1, 2, 3, ready? Here we go. Come gather around, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. Don't forget that extra measure. If your time to you is worth saving, so you better start swimming or sink like a stone, for the times they are changing. Let's go ahead and move to verse 2. I'm gonna start to do more of those I'm gonna do those upstrums. I'm gonna do the intermediate part, but remember, you can always do the beginner just down, down, up, down. And again, if that's a really challenging, or this is the first time you're taking on verse 2, just go back to those quarter notes. It's so much easier. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin. Good. And there's no telling who that's naming, for the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changin'. Cool. So those couple of additions for the intermediate arrangement, that ghost note, trying to integrate that, and then singing and playing, I think those are going to be the big focus for this week. Remember, really have your rhythms locked down. You can move freely between the main quarter note rhythm and its variants, and then being able to link all of these progressions together. Remember, left hand technique for this song is going to be a little more challenged just by sheer number, but these chords, right? You just got to lock in the order, connect that with your ear hearing each one of these progressions. Cool. Thanks for joining, and all your work in Uke Lab this month. We will see you. Oh yeah, just a quick reminder, for the 4th week, we're going to be pre-recording that class, so don't try to log into live class for Thanksgiving week. Cool. All right, folks, we will see you next time. Bye-bye.